I will just briefly summarize what I did this morning in my presentation. So both Viviane and I are lawyers. We are attorneys. I have been a trial lawyer for 27 years. My firm and I have been representing small and medium-sized businesses and consumers, usually against large corporations, fraudulent corporations. And we have learned very early in the German courts of law that justice is not for everyone, only for the rich. Through our professional activities, I'm talking about myself and my firm, we used to be 17 lawyers, and we did always the same thing. We represented consumers against Deutsche Bank, for example, which is probably the most criminal organization in the world. I know it because I used to work for them. And we represented consumers against VW, or the world's largest freight carrier or shipping company, that is Kühne & Nagel. And it became very clear that some of these very large global players are, or think that they are above the law. And that is because the judiciary in Germany is not independent at all. Maybe they think they are, but they're not. This is very clear if you look at what our chancellor once suggested. She said, she came up with the idea that Deutsche Bank is of systemical relevance to our society in Germany, which in effect means that Deutsche Bank is above the law. That is what she meant, and that is precisely what the judiciary, what the judges in our country understood. Now, when I say our chancellor, I mean Angela Merkel. And the truth of the matter is, from what we have learned through our sessions with the Corona Committee, she's not really our chancellor. She's somebody else's chancellor. Somebody else is pulling her strings. To make a long story short, out of this experience that my colleagues and I have had for 15, maybe 17 years now, we ran into the Corona crisis. And all of a sudden, it looks as though we're not just fighting one large corporation at a time, but dozens and dozens of large financial, pharmaceutical, and technical corporations. So we have known for a long time that there's something not quite right with the judges, with the judicial system in Germany. But we, that is my firm and I, we couldn't really put our finger on what it was that doesn't really make any sense. Now, through this Corona pandemic, we have learned that the German judiciary is not only not independent, but it is corrupt. Corrupt not in the sense of everybody getting paid. That's not really how it works. But if you are a judge in Germany, once a year, your president, the president of the court at which you work, writes a personal assessment about you. And if that says that you didn't take enough, that you didn't take into account, for example, employment issues or the importance of a systemically relevant corporation, then that means that that is the end of your career. I have always managed to keep my balance because I can not only practice law in Germany, but also in the United States and the state of California. And there, at least until Corona, the judiciary still worked. They still functioned because many of the judges there, the state judges, are elected by the people. So many of them are really independent, unlike our judges in Germany. So this is my background. This is the experience that I come from. Then in March of 2020, my wife and I were staying at our ranch in California, and I was intending to stay there. My wife doesn't really like it there. She likes the ranch, she likes the land, but she doesn't like the cities. She says there's no culture there, and if you want to have something, if you want to go out for a really good dinner, you have to pay twice as much as in Germany, and it's still not good. So she has been wanting to go back. Then came Corona, and I immediately sensed that there's something wrong. It felt as though I was walking into a court of law with all these hostile judges when I fought Deutsche Bank. So when I then heard all these stories from our friends and relatives in Germany and other parts of Europe that there's these lockdowns going on, and all of a sudden people were forced to wear these coffee filters and call it masks, I sensed that my wife, she she feels the same way as I do about these things, but she wanted us to take this as an opportunity to come back to Germany. That's how Viviane and I got in touch, through our friend Wolfgang Wodak, because I said, okay, I'm going to go back to Germany, I'm going to do something about it, but I need someone to work with, because I cannot be the only one. Wolfgang Wodak said, she's the one, she's really tough, get in touch with her. We met in Berlin for the first time in, I think, early July of 2020, and it was my idea to have a week-long or maybe a weekend-long symposium. She said, no, this is way too much information that we're going to have to dig up. Let's make this not a symposium, but rather let's make this into a committee, into an investigative committee. Then we will have like 4, 5, 6 weeks, and then the whole thing will be over. So that's how we started the Corona Committee on July 10th, but the whole thing is not over yet. In the meantime, we have, I think, had 78 maybe sessions, meaning once a week we meet on Fridays usually, and we have interviewed over 150 very well-known experts from all over the world, including Robert Kennedy of Children's Health Defense. He is very much anti-vaccination. He knows everything about vaccinations, including Dr. Robert Malone. Robert Malone is the inventor of the mRNA technique, vaccination technique. And he, even though he was kind of shy in the beginning, now is very outspoken, says this is experiments on unsuspecting human beings. This is breaking every law. It is against all medical ethics that he's ever heard of, and it's in massive violation of the Nuremberg Code. Dr. Mike Yeadon, who is the former vice president of Pfizer, explained to us how these so-called vaccines have a very high potential of doing a lot of damage and killing people. Luc Montagnier, Professor Luc Montagnier, he's a Nobel Prize winner from France. He explained to us the very same thing. He says this is going through ADE and other adverse reactions. This is going to kill a lot of people. Do not get these vaccinations. Then came an expert in economics, the former Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development of the United States, Catherine Austin Fitz. She explained to us what is behind all this. So we have a very complete, not quite complete, but almost complete picture of what is really going on now. So the 3 basic questions that we wanted answers to are, how dangerous is the virus really? Turns out there is a virus, yes, no one is denying that, but it is no more dangerous than the common flu, at 0.14 or 0.15 infection fatality rate. That's what even the World Health Organization says, and that's also what one of the most cited and quoted scientists in the world, Professor John Ioannidis of Stanford University, says. So there's no real reason to take any special precautions because we've never done so with the common flu. The second question we wanted answers to is, how reliable is the PCR test that Mr. Drosten, Professor Dr. Drosten he calls himself, but he's really a Mr. Drosten, that he invented with the aim of detecting infections? The answer to that is it is not reliable at all, and the way he set his test up, it was guaranteed to produce 100% false positives. So in short, the virus is no more dangerous than the common flu. The survival rate is 99.97%. It is completely irrelevant for children. Children have, statistically speaking, absolutely no risk of getting sick or even dying from COVID. The PCR test, which is the only foundation for any and all of the measures, because it is only the PCR test with which the cases, positive test results, were created. The PCR test is totally unreliable. Everyone knows that the PCR test alone cannot tell us anything about infections. And the way that Drosten set up his test, it was guaranteed to produce false positives. The big question now is, what is behind this if it is not health? And the answer to that is very simple, because if you look at the answer to our third question, which was, how much damage do the anti-corona measures do? The mask mandates, the vaccines, social distancing. If you look at the damage that results from these measures, then you know what this is about. Because from what we have learned through all the people who we listen to, including, of course, the psychiatrists and psychologists, it looks as though this damage is not accidental, but intentional. Okay, let me quickly conclude this summary so that it doesn't get too long, and then we can get into the details. The big question, of course, is how do we end all this? I'm convinced that the only way to end this is by the people rising up and telling the authorities that this is the end of the line, that they are the people. We are the people, not them. It is not the courts of law. The courts of law, maybe we can use them to clean things up, but I'm afraid they're not even good for that, because they're so infiltrated by the other side that we're going to have to set up a whole new judicial system. Okay, I think I have probably missed a few things that you also should know, but we can do that through questions and answers. But I also want to give Viviana a chance to give her take on what we have learned through the Corona Committee, because she's the one who invented it.
Yeah, well, my name is Viviane Fischer. I'm an attorney at law and also an economist. And interestingly, it was also on a ranch that I had the feeling that something was severely wrong. I live in Berlin, like most of the time. But for when the lockdown came, basically, or just before that, I was on my ranch because I breed a very rare type of sheep. We're trying to save it from extinction. And so I have 135 sheep, and only 300 sheep exist of that type. So I was on the farm, and there was like a lot of hype going on. Just starting, we had, I think, very, very few dead people from Corona at this point. And I thought, this is going to be another swine flu hype, and in a few weeks it's going to be over. And yeah, maybe it's the peace of mind that you have in the countryside, that makes you look at things in a different way. And so when they decided on the lockdown, I immediately thought there's something severely wrong, because as a lawyer, I could see that this is like a completely out of proportion with regards to the basic rights that we have as people, and as an economist, I immediately saw this is so dangerous for our whole system. This cannot be that they would risk this kind of damage for the whole population just for these few people that we could see, like on the horizon, the few dead people. I thought this is a political thing that's going on. But I still had the sort of the hope that it could be just fear-driven, because there were these pictures from Italy. So I thought maybe it was some sort of overreaction, and I started a petition. Chancellor Merkel, please conduct a baseline study. So do some representative study of like the infection, how it's, how it develops. So we have some solid corona data. And this petition was signed by a huge amount of people. Like in a few days, it was like 30,000 people, and then more and more signed. And I received all these emails where people say, well, I'm having all these issues because I can't go to the doctor anymore, and I'm suffering from, like, I'm in a state of loss because I've been, psychologically I can't cope with this anymore. And at the same time, I received emails from people from the hospitals saying, well, they're saying, in the public or in the media that the hospitals are all crowded, but in fact, we have nothing to do. We're on we're at home on leave because there's not enough work for us, and the chief of the hospital is taking a nap during lunchtime. Yeah, so I had more and more questions, and I got in touch with a lot of scientists through the petition, and so it developed from there that finally, when we met, basically, I thought this has to be investigated on a larger scale. And in the meantime, for instance, with regards to the hospital situation, it turned out that was broadcast then in the media, in the mainstream media, that actually there was never any overcrowding of the hospital. So it got called then intensive care lie. That's how they titled it. So it's intensive care bed lie, whatever. So it's out there. It's really all the things, the questions that we have in the beginning, like more and more of the problems that we saw, that weren't there, that the masks don't make sense, and all that is becoming more and more obvious, and actually is also admitted by mainstream media and even politicians. But still, it continues, which again shows that it is of political or other than health reasons that this is going on. Yeah, and in the meantime, the Corona Committee has turned into a hub, basically also for information. We have a whistleblower tool, and a lot of people who are still hesitant to come out to the public because they fear for their jobs or are afraid of other, stress, social stress, or just can't deal with it at the moment. They come to us and tell us what they know. So we have the opportunity. We have produced quite a few of whistleblower videos, for instance, from a Berlin old people's home where vaccination was performed on 30 people, and shortly after that, 8 old ladies and gentlemen died, and it was really obviously like a connection to the vaccine, because they were, the day before, one of them played the piano and was in in best shape, and then boom, considering his old age, but didn't have any additional health problems, and next thing you see, he's dead. So and we also we gave the information to the district attorney, but they didn't do anything. So it's interesting how it's all connected, and how, what Rainer said, basically, from a legal point of view, there's very little we can do, but we do need to inform the public about what's going on and collect all this information and transport it to the public, so they can then, in the end, hopefully will take their own decisions if they want to continue with this big fake, basically, or if they want to disconnect. Yeah, my last remark is, I think the most important thing is that we connect internationally, because that also makes it all of a sudden possible to see that you have the same thing going on all around the world in each country, except for a few countries who took a different path, but some of them are going back and forth and seem to be used to for instance, Denmark, everything was fine, and boom, they're now back to some sort of lockdown situation. It's like kind of meandering around, but basically it's the same procedure that's going on in every country, and from that you see that it's a systemic problem, because otherwise people would react more to what they see in their country. Like, we spoke to someone in Nepal, a friend of mine, and he said, basically we had the lockdown on this whole country, with 0 dead people. And that is very, very strange. And by seeing also what's going on in Poland here, you get the larger picture. And I think it also gives us the, opportunity to sort of to come out with some sort of international solidarity, supporting each other, and show the others in the individual country there's others out there who see it the same way, and we must act internationally also, so that you're not isolated in one country, but through the support you get from outside, it also protects the activists or the people who are outspoken in the country.
That's a good question. There are many scientists out there who are saying that this virus has never been isolated. Others are saying, yes, it has been isolated. I am not convinced. I do not think that the virus has been isolated, but I do not want to get into this fight, because it doesn't really matter. From what I hear, the isolation of the virus is not what I would consider an isolation with a natural virus, but rather this is an isolation that is being done in a computer model. That doesn't convince me. But I don't want to get into this fight, because I think we can do without answering this question. if we know that the virus is no more dangerous than the flu, and if we also know that we don't have a corona pandemic, but only a PCR test pandemic, let's go after the people who put out these lies. Drosten, the WHO, Tedros, Fauci. And then, as the Americans say, let's follow the evidence from one person to the next. And I'm sure that many of these people who are just puppets, many of these people are cowards. And sooner or later, they will lead us to who is really in charge and really responsible. Yes, I agree. We did take a close look at the medical issues because that's how we started. Of course, we first wanted to know, is this really a dangerous disease? Obviously, it's not. There is no excess mortality from COVID anywhere. In those few places where you did have spikes, like in Bergamo, Italy, and in New York, these spikes were due to the fact that this was medical malpractice. But let's not go into the details of that. So as soon as we knew this has nothing to do with health, we looked into the damage that is being done through the corona measures, and we very quickly found out that this is not just a negligence thing. This is intentional. From what we learned from Catherine Austin Fitz, of course, there's a very small group of very rich people who are running the show behind the scenes, who are using these puppets. I don't know, maybe 300, maybe 3,000 very rich families who invest their money into large vehicles like BlackRock and Vanguard and some of the others. And through these investments, or through these vehicles, they then reinvest their money in Deutsche Bank, for example. 10% of the shares of Deutsche Bank are owned by BlackRock. Thereby, they control it. They control it, together with maybe the Chinese and people from Qatar. Now, what is this all about? When I say this is intentional, I'm not saying this because I made it up. It's because this is what we hear from all these economists who we spoke with. Ernst Wolf is one of the most renowned economists in our country. Or Catherine Austin Fitz. Or Leslie Mnuchin, a former investment banker who explained to us that the reason why Europe is so hard hit and why they're trying to hammer things down here in Europe and in Germany in particular is because Europe is completely broke. They have stolen our taxpayers' money for decades, and completely broke means that even the pension funds are completely empty. And you're right, yes. So in essence, the big question, of course, is why are they doing this? The answer is I think they're afraid of us because there's so few of them, maybe 10,000, maybe 3,000, we don't know. But they have a lot of money. Why do they have this money? Because they stole it from us through their corporations. And they're afraid that we have found out about it. And we have found out about it. So they needed something to distract our attention. And that's how they invented Corona. They want control, complete control, because they are psychopaths and sociopaths. Again, this is not my invention. This is what we get from hearing, from listening to all these professors of psychology and even former intelligence officers who explain to us that this is a huge psychological operation, PSYOP. They're trying to scare everyone so that no one can think anymore, and that everyone in the end agrees to vaccinations with something that is not a vaccine, but it kills.
Hello? Yeah, yes, of course we're open to all that. You know, we actually, like with regards to the judges, we were contacted by a judge, like a still active judge, and we were basically the hub through which a lot of still active judges and attorneys, district attorneys, formed a group, because we were sort of the hub of trust, you know, because it's kind of dangerous for them because they're civil servants. And if they do something outspokenly, you know, it can be used against them. And of course, they didn't know from the beginning who would, you know, be then part of the crowd, and if there was if it would be a troll or something like that. So I think definitely we have set a lot of organizations. We are in contact with a lot of organizations, like in Germany and from other places in the world. And we're happy to include, you know, activists from Poland. And we're actually also very interested to meet this judge, you know, get in touch with him. would be very interesting for us. And I think it's really, I mean, being out in the public, visible internationally, is really the best kind of protections. And don't keep anything for yourself, like the information you have. Once it's out there, you're definitely more protected than when you keep it to yourself and then maybe, someone or whatever is behind you and puts pressure on you to keep silent. So it's much, much better to do it.
Let me add one thing. My favorite movies have always been Westerns. They're so simple. It's good against evil. And that's what this is all about. And when it comes to this realization, then it's us. We're the good guys. It's so obvious because the other side, everyone is dropping their masks right now, and we can see who they really are. We can see who is really evil. We know that there are many people out there, judges, politicians, media people, who we will never be able to trust again because they have betrayed us. So it's us. We're the good guys. It's very obvious. It's us who have to connect, because through this connection, we gain so much strength that they have no chance against us. But it is only through this connection. We cannot we're not a people who should be isolated. We're social beings. So through this connection, I think, international connection, I think we will exchange very valuable information, because it is only through these international connections that we learned what's going on in the other countries, because they tried to tell us this is an individual kind of thing in Germany. No, it's not. This is part of an agenda that's being rolled out all over the world. And this can only be dealt with on an international level by all of us being connected and fight and joining in this fight.
Sorry, let me just add one thing. I think that is also why, with these lockdowns and the social distancing, I think they are also really trying to kill this, keep us apart, because this is where the energy is. Like when we get together, also when we're physically getting together, like here, you can feel, a different level of energy. There's a lot of ideas. There's a lot of, friendship growing, love, even maybe here, like that we just feel we're fighting together in the same, on the same line. So. That's also the people that we've met in this fight. Basically, it feels as if we've known them for a very long time. It's an immediate connection because we are really doing the right thing. That's what we think, and that's why we also think it's so. There's so much effort to really not let people talk together and meet and be in the pubs together, where maybe they could have the wrong ideas to stop the system, to say it's enough, and I hear from you that you have all these damages, and we don't want to continue with this anymore. But we have to find, ways to be together physically, but also to connect through online and use the tools that we have at this moment in time.
Yes, I think if the right time comes, I shouldn't say if, when. It will come. When the right time comes, I think it'll be crucial for all of us to be connected, for the light side to be connected, because we're so much stronger than the other side. I don't know if we have reached the right time yet, but I'm sure we soon will, because this has been very exhausting. For most of us, it has been very exhausting. But you're absolutely right to point to the spiritual level, because I've always realized, not always, but since we started our Corona Committee, I began to understand that there's something apart from educating people and going to the courts of law. There's something else. There's another level. I'm not a religious person because I don't believe in organized religion. I think it's all about power. But I know, and my wife knows, that there is something cosmic, spiritual, maybe religious, call it what you will. And that may be crucial, because I told this story this morning. I think it's a great story, because one of the doctors who we spoke with in our Corona Committee, he told us this story. And it's a very touching story. It's about this doctor going to an ATM, wanting to withdraw money from this ATM. He went into the lobby of a bank where the ATM machine was standing, and there was only one other person in that room, and that was an old lady. She was scared, and she was wearing a mask, and he was not. So she told him, "Don't, you can't come in here. You have to wear a mask." He said, "No, I don't. You don't have to wear a mask either." And she said, "Yes, I do, because I'm afraid I'm going to get infected, and then my husband, he's sick, he's at home, and maybe he's going to die." And he said, "No, you don't have to wear a mask." And then he moved closer to her, pulled her mask off, and hugged her. And she started to cry, because nobody had hugged her in over a year. That's what this is all about. That's what humanity is all about. It's about empathy. It's about emotions. They don't have emotions. They are monsters. They are monsters. That's why we have to connect. And that's why we're doing this. And that's why we're going to win. There's no other way. Yes, we will hold them accountable. We have a very good friend who used to be our most important legal advisor on the Corona Committee. His name is Professor Dr. Martin Schwab. He's not related with the evil Schwab. He's a great man. It's just that he's under a lot of pressure right now from his university because he's appeared so many times on our Corona Committee. But he is still, behind the scene, he's still helping us. And he wrote a long expert opinion about the role of the media in this. And it's very obvious. He did it for the protection of his friend Wolfgang Wodak, because he was being smeared. There were smear campaigns in the mainstream media in order to make him look, Wolfgang Wodak, like a right-wing Nazi. They always do that. And of course we will be able to hold them accountable. The question is, how many of them will still be there when we're through with this? Because it looks as though they don't have a very good survival rate. It's not us who are going to do anything, but something is happening right now, I feel. Something is happening. They have overplayed their hand, and I think there's something or somebody out there to go after them. But if they do still exist when this is over, we're going to go after them. One thing I should add, our friends in France, they are one step ahead of us. They're already filing complaints, criminal complaints, against the mainstream media because they're lying to the public so that they will take the vaccines without understanding what they're really doing. So they are being held accountable in France already. That could be a role model for us, for the Polish people, for the German people, and all of the others.
Just one remark, because it seems that the person who asked the question said that these coffins in Bergamo did not exist. And to our knowledge, and that was actually like published in the mainstream media in Berlin, or Berliner Zeitung, I think, or Berliner BR, Berliner Rundfunk, I don't know, like one of the mainstream media outlets published this story, and we heard this also from people in Italy. They did exist, but they were basically, it happened that there was a little bit of a backlog of people being buried because in this, hype, they said that all the people who died from corona had to be burnt. And that's not common in Italy. So in these crematoriums, there was not enough space. And then they could have transported these coffins in a different way, but they did it in this like very dramatic kind of way in order to create these pictures. So I think that must have been the connection. But there were coffins, it seemed, but not in this like horrific, because it's so many that they need to transport them with these vans.
It was only last Friday when we had our 78th session that we spoke with two other psychiatrists, one from France and the other one from the United States. And they explained to us that it's all about knowledge, all about understanding what is going on. Of course, it makes the most sense to get in touch with the police and the military, because maybe they're going to get the order to go after us. We have seen a short video clip with an interview which we think is real, an interview that was given by an Australian soldier, and he explained to the people who interviewed him that they were now, the Australian soldiers, that they were now getting training in kicking in people's doors and forcing them outside so that they could vaccinate them. And he said, I'm not going to do this. This is totally wrong. We cannot do this. I think that on the spiritual level, many people, even the military and the police, have a built-in inner compass that tells them what is right and what is wrong. And they will understand that these orders are totally illegal. But of course we can help them understand that by approaching them, if they let us. There's probably nothing we can do if they don't want to talk to us. We can only hope that they will understand that it's not a really good idea to go after their own family and friends, because that is ultimately what they have to do. But I think that as far as this, I don't know, religion or cosmic equilibrium, whatever it is, this built-in stuff, I think they have it. Most of them have it. And if it comes to that, I think they will not follow these orders. If they do, I don't think they're going to survive.
I just wanted, first of all, to say that I really appreciate what you're doing, and I've been following you, Mr. Vermisch, for more than 12 months now, and I feel that there is hope. I'm just a concerned citizen. My name is Dorota Viger. I'm not with press. I'm just here privately. Given, everything that has been going on for the last 20 months, and given the pace, I just wanted to ask, how long do you think the whole Nuremberg 2.0 trial is going to take? And realistically, because last night in Austria, they announced lockdown for unvaccinated people. We know what's been going on in Australia, and that scares me to the core. So realistically, how much time do we have, and how much, it's going to take? Thank you.
It's the difference between the original Nuremberg trial and what we are thinking of is that when they conducted the Nuremberg trials, it was not one but many trials after the war. It was after the war. The war had ended. What we're doing right now and what we're planning to do is going to happen while the war is probably still going on. We hope that it is going to be over soon. I mean, it won't really be over because there's lots of cleanup work to be done. But I hope that it's only going to take maybe a few more weeks, maybe 2 or 3 more months, because they really have overplayed their hands. They're going wild. They're running amok right now. But we're planning on conducting an international trial with maybe the 40 lawyers who we've been in touch with, including one of the lawyers here from this country. And this is the plan is to do this towards the end of the year. And it's only going to be a trial for, it's a real trial, but with a real judge, with real experts, and with real witnesses, and real lawyers, of course, from every country. The most important message that this trial is going to send is the one that is being sent through the witnesses who will explain what happened to them, what kind of damage they suffered, how their businesses were destroyed, how they lost a loved one, how they lost a kidney, maybe because of the side effects, the adverse effects. But there will be a verdict too. So this will only go on for six days maybe, just to give the other side a taste of what is to come. Because we are ready. We have the people, we have the lawyers who are educated and who understand what this is all about. So the actual trial, this will be just a first trial. There will be more than just one trial. But the jury will be the people who watch this through a live stream. And they will ultimately, they're the ones who are going to hand down the verdict. But again, we're going to need many more than just this one trial. There's many more such trials that are actually being filed right now in the United States in particular, because there are still many judges who are really independent. Many of them who were elected by the people who they work with in their region. But as I said, the only way to turn this thing around is not through the courts of law. That takes too long. It's by the people. Rise up and tell them to go to hell, because that's where they come from.
I have a question, maybe for advice for parents and for children, in relation to accident in Florida school, where 8-year-old girl was suspended 38 times because she didn't want to put mask on. And many children right now, all over the world, in every country where this oppression takes place, are in the same position. They are abused at schools, and they are being restricted from having regular school life if they don't want to put mask on. So what would be your advice to children, like to 8-year-old children, 12-year-old children, and to the parents, how they can protect themselves in situations like that?
These are the very same questions that we're getting from everyone. We spoke with members of the Los Angeles Police Department, which is probably the most famous police department in the world, except maybe for the New York Police Department. But LAPD stands for something. And they asked us the very same question: what are we going to do? They're going to fire us if we do not get vaccinated. And in the beginning, there were, I think, 50% of the police force of 9,000 something police officers who were not going to play along. However, they have now reached a point at which I think maybe 10 or 15% will not comply. Everyone else has finally taken the shot because they're afraid to lose their jobs, because they have a mortgage to pay, they have children to support. But there are a few of these officers who are still standing tall. One of them, he appeared on our Corona committee. His name is Michael McMahon, and great guy. And he just sent me a text message. He said, "I'm not going to comply. They took away my badge, they took away my gun, but I will not cave in." We need that. But that, all of us have to do this. You cannot bow to the pressure that they apply on you. For example, I don't know what to do when I go back to Germany because we have to go to court on Thursday. We're representing Wolfgang Wodak against a group of so-called fact checkers, a bunch of liars. And the pressure is high because the court has just issued an order, very long one, 4 pages long, telling us, I'm the boss, you have to do what I tell you, including you have to wear a mask. And if you don't wear a mask, then I want to see your exemption, your medical exemption, but it has to be what he calls a qualified medical exemption, meaning I have to tell him what my medical problems are. I'm not going to do that. And on top of that, I also have to show him if I don't want to wear a mask, I have to give him a qualified medical exemption plus a medical, a negative PCR test. I'm not going to do that. I cannot do that, or else I'm going to lose my entire credibility. I cannot do this. No one can do this. The children can't do this. I think it's a powerful message that this girl sends by getting expelled from school 38 times. I mean, don't comply. That's what this is about. And the more people that don't comply, the more people will have and show respect for these people. There's this one man, we interviewed him a couple of times. He owns a restaurant in Huntington Beach in California, in Los Angeles. His name is Tony Roman. Tony Roman has not closed his business for one day, not for one day. He's been harassed. The police came over. They tried to close his restaurant, but he's not closed it. And in the meantime, in the beginning, for a couple of weeks or so, he thought, oh man, I'm going to go broke. People are not going to come. Now they're coming from everywhere. Everywhere. They are flying into Los Angeles from all of the other states just to be able to sit down, have a glass of wine, and eat stuff with good people who don't wear masks and who are not afraid. They're standing in line in front of his restaurant, wait for hours. That's what's going to happen when we turn this thing around. But the only way to do it is to get people to rise up and not back down.
Let me add one thing. Like with regards to the schools, what we can see in, for instance, in Austria, there's no obligation to have the kids in school. I don't know what the situation here in Poland is. In Germany, people are obliged to send their kids to school. But in Austria, for instance, there are a lot of parents who decided not to let the children be under this torturous situation in the schools. And so they're getting together and forming like their own private schools or like teaching constellations outside of the official school system. And actually this is also happening in Germany with like, it's a little bit more, there are more obstacles, but this is something that's also very important to start to, working on the new system that we are going to need once the old system has gone down, which we expect to be really rather soon, that it's not going to be supporting itself anymore on its cart-house legs. But, and that's another thing that's really important, to connect locally, regionally, and to form support groups also for food and for other things, health support. We are now organizing a network of doctors, that are willing to look into, for instance, vaccination damages, because some of the vaccination doctors are not willing to see the damages that they caused. And so that's also important to get in touch and set up these networks that are going to be so helpful in the future.
Criminal law is really simple. I used to think it's great, but it's so simple that it's no fun. What it always boils down to, because we look at criminal law on three levels. One is, was the act committed, the killing of another person? That's the act. The second level, once you have established that, is, was it justified? Was it self-defense maybe? Most of the time it's not. So on the third level, this is where all the action is this for some reason excused? Does the person, or did the person when he did it, or she did it, are they culpable? Can they be held responsible? And it just so happens that on Friday, this past Friday, we spoke about this very issue with, I think this is the the French psychiatrist or psychologist. And she said this. She said, these people, the puppets, Marionetten, these puppets, they know what they're doing. They're doing it to protect their own hide. Drosten, for example, he's one of these mediocre persons who has come out into the limelight because of this crisis. He's tried it once before during the swine flu. He was totally discredited, but he's still around. Why? Because he's a usable and useful puppet. And Viviana's question was, but is he responsible? Can he be held liable in criminal law? And she said yes, because he knows what he's doing. He's doing it. He doesn't care if he kills people. He knows it to protect his own hide. So they are responsible. They will have to pay a price. If not in a court of law, then someplace else. And that's going to be a much higher price, I think. One more thing. It all boils down to, can they plead insanity? We know what they've done, and we know that there's no justification. So can they plead insanity? No, they cannot. That's what this psychiatrist said, and I agree with that because that's what I learned in law school. You're not insane if you know what you're doing and you can control what you're doing. These people know what they're doing, and they can control what they're doing. They cannot plead insanity. I mean, they're psychopaths, but they're not crazy.
We've been, behind the scenes, we are working with a lot of doctors who who are currently looking at the vaccines, and some of them work in normal universities, have normal jobs in universities and have not come out to the public yet, so that they're giving the information also to us and to other doctors in the network. And actually, we were involved in the pathology conference. I think you mentioned this, because we paid for some of the autopsies that were performed, and where the pathologists presented their findings in this conference, and also some preliminary results from looking at the vaccines. There's going to be another pathology conference in the beginning of December with a lot of new information about what we know in the meantime, what we've learned about the vaccines. And there seems to be it seems to be propelling cancer to enormous growth within a short time, at least under certain circumstances. And we're still waiting for the final results, but it looks as if it was going that direction. And we also have additional information. I think it's very, very important to look at what's going on with the vaccines, but it's not such an easy task, because you need a very specialized laboratory to do this, and there are not so many laboratories cooperating at this point in time, because they are also afraid. And if you go to a regular, out there laboratory, it's a bit complicated, because once you ask for certain tests to be performed, they know what it's about, so they're not doing it. So we have to work with scientists behind the scenes, and we're doing this, and I think it's moving in the right direction. We'll have some new information soon.
Well, there's only one piece of advice I can only repeat myself. Don't play along, because this is not a choice between, well, I have to fall in line and get the shot, and then I will be able to go back to school. This is a choice potentially between life and death. People have to understand this. If they do know that these vaccines, which are not vaccines, can be deadly, then it's an easy choice. Just don't do it. Because the problem is, of course we can go and try and sue them in the courts of law. In Germany, the system has completely broken down. There's 4 areas of law in which you can go and try and seek justice. One is the administrative law courts. Forget it. The administrative law courts are always on the side of the administration. That's why they're called administrative law courts. They're the most cowardice people I know. Then there's the criminal law courts. You have to go see a prosecutor, a district attorney. These people are not independent in Germany. Even Staatsanwälte, they are the attorneys of the state. And even the European Court has proclaimed that German prosecutors are not independent, and that's why they cannot issue international arrest warrants, let alone enforce them. They cannot, because there's always the suspicion that what this prosecutor does is motivated by politics, because Angela Merkel wants to get someone out of the way. She goes after him by sending out her prosecutors. So this line of defense doesn't work either. It's only the civil courts of law in which maybe there's going to be justice someday. I don't think so. I think we're going to have to set up our own legal systems, and we will. We will. I think we have to set up our own, well, what do you call this? I guess we have to set up our own parallel universe. Setting up our own, and we should start now. In many cases, we have started already, because the current system cannot be saved. It's beyond repair. You can't fix anything. We have to set up our own system of economics, of education, of law, and mostly education, because education is so important. If people don't learn what this is all about, if they don't learn that they need to ask questions, then they're going to be turned into robots. And that's what they're trying to do with our children. They try to turn them into robots because they want to control the population, but some will be left over, and they need to control them in order to make them into slaves, more or less. I mean, this sounds ridiculous, And then, as I said before, if somebody had told me this a year and a half ago, I would have told them, go take your pills. But in the meantime, we've come to the conclusion that we are running out of conspiracy theories because they're all true all of a sudden. So the only advice I can give you is don't play along. Connect with everyone else. Set up your own parallel universe. Connect with all of the people who are on the good side. And then when the time comes, and it will come, I think it will come soon, we all will rise up and we will send them to hell, where they came from.